Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is going to be titled Personal Growth. People need to understand that personal growth isn't a spectator sport. It's not a subscription-based course you can follow step by step. It's not a series of highlighted quotes, productivity hacks, or therapeutic catchphrases you string together to look healed. And it definitely isn't something you inherit with age, status, or just the accumulation of experiences. Growth doesn't operate on a timer or follow public approval. It's not neat, it's not pretty, and it damn sure isn't linear. Real growth happens in the quiet, when the world isn't watching, when you've run out of scripts and applause, and you're left sitting in a room with everything you've pretended not to be. It's raw, often unspeakable. It's crying over something you thought you were over. It's confronting parts of yourself you thought were long buried. And sometimes, it's not healing in the pretty way people like to package it. It's unraveling. Not to fall apart, but to finally figure out what wasn't yours to carry in the first place. But people keep doing the same thing. They try to make it consumable, digestible, marketable. Like you can funnel the most intimate and painful parts of your transformation into a 10-second soundbite or a 3-minute podcast clip with background lo-fi. There's a whole economy built on manufacturing the illusion of growth, but I'm not playing that game. When I share something, a piece of reflection, a shift in perspective, I'm not handing out advice. I'm not demanding agreement. I'm giving shape to something intangible that I've been wrestling with internally. That's it. That's the offering. And yet, the moment a thought enters a public space, it gets treated like debate material. People swarm to dissect it, impose their worldview onto it, correct its tone, or bend it until it aligns with their framework. They treat it like an argument when it was never about them to begin with. There's an obsession with interpretation, not understanding, interpretation. As in, how does this make me feel? How does this compare to my view? How do I position myself in response to this? That's the addiction, to always center the self, even in someone else's expression. And when they can't comfortably insert themselves, they become hostile. They ridicule. They dismiss. Not because what you said was dangerous, but because it threatened the illusion they built around their own comfort. It's wild how many people can't allow someone to evolve without feeling personally attacked by it. Because if your growth invalidates their stagnation, it becomes easier for them to frame you as arrogant, misguided, or fake than it is to confront the fact that they're stuck. You begin to realize the resistance you encounter isn't rooted in logic. It's emotional. It's psychological. It's spiritual even. We live in a culture that's terrified of depth, where surface-level transformation is celebrated. Look how productive they've become. Look how aesthetic their space is. Look how composed they sound. But the gritty, ugly, trembling in the dark kind of progress, that's too uncomfortable, too unpredictable. And so, to shield themselves, people pretend they understand. They latch onto buzzwords. They perform empathy. But the moment your evolution disrupts their worldview, the mask slips. They don't want you whole. They want you predictable. And let's talk about that for a moment. Predictability. It's this currency people use to measure safety. The more predictable you are, the safer they feel. So when you begin to act outside the script, when you shift boundaries, alter your priorities, change how you speak, what you tolerate, or what you focus on, they interpret that as a threat. Not because you've harmed them, but because you've exited the version of yourself that once catered to their comfort. You are no longer the reflection they want to see, and for some, that's unacceptable. This is why people cling so tightly to who you used to be. That version felt familiar, manageable. Maybe you were easier to dismiss then, easier to placate, easier to control. And now, your clarity feels confrontational. Your self-awareness feels like defiance. Your authenticity feels like rebellion. But nothing about it was ever aimed at them. You're just showing up for yourself in a way you didn't or couldn't before. There's also this nonsense belief that growth should be legible to others, that if you're doing it right, people will understand you better. But often, the opposite is true. The deeper you go into your own becoming, the more confusing you become to those still living by templates. They'll say you're cold now because you don't overextend. They'll say you've changed because you don't contort. They'll say you're distant because you stopped chasing. But those aren't flaws. Those are boundaries, hard-earned and unapologetic. People want change they can applaud, not change that challenges them. They want progress that entertains, not progress that requires reflection. So when you stop living to be observed, when you stop offering a digestible version of your transformation, they feel displaced. And you start to see who really values you for your truth, versus those who only valued you in how you validated their comfort. Let's make something clear. You owe no one a translation of your evolution. You don't have to water down your boundaries. You don't have to soften your insight. You don't have to perform palatability just because someone else refuses to deepen their emotional range. You don't owe the world a version of yourself that's easy to swallow. What you owe is truth to yourself. Consistently, relentlessly, even when it makes you the villain in someone else's story. And truth, that kind of soul-rooted honesty, isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's inconvenient. Sometimes it upends everything. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like disappointing those who built their identity around your compliance. And it hurts. Not because the growth is wrong, but because the shedding is real. And loss, even necessary loss, cuts deep. But what's the alternative? Shrinking yourself to fit into places you've outgrown? Quieting your intuition so others don't feel insecure? Endlessly managing perception instead of living with conviction? That's not peace. That's performance, and it will eat you alive. Let me tell you something real. Transformation often isolates you before it frees you. The deeper you go, the fewer people you take with you. Not out of bitterness, but because alignment requires integrity. And not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone wants that. They say they do. But what they really want is proximity to your growth, not the reality of it. They want the glow, but not the gravity. The aesthetic, but not the accountability. True growth, your growth, will trigger people. It will unsettle those who benefit from your confusion. It will irritate those who liked you better broken. And that's not cruelty. That's clarity. You are not responsible for soothing everyone through your transformation. You're responsible for honoring your becoming, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Because the truth is, discomfort is part of this process. You'll lose some things, some people, some narratives, but in return, you gain alignment. You gain wholeness. You gain a version of yourself that doesn't need to rehearse authenticity or dilute emotion or shrink brilliance just to feel accepted. And not every season of life needs to be explained. Some chapters will not make sense to those observing from the outside. Some shifts will look like collapse when they are actually resurrection. Some endings will feel cruel before they reveal the liberation they're making space for. So no, I'm not interested in perfecting myself into something likable. I'm not curating a highlight reel of personal growth that makes you feel better about not doing the work. I'm not asking to be understood. I'm asking to be real, with myself, first and foremost. Because what I've learned is this: the more aligned you are, the less explaining you feel compelled to do. You stop apologizing for your standards. You stop needing validation for your choices. You stop leaking energy into spaces that do not nourish your spirit. You become whole. Not flawless. Whole. I'm not perfect. I never will be. Perfection is a myth peddled by those who fear vulnerability. I'd rather be bruised and awake than shiny and numb. I'd rather be misunderstood and free than loved for a version of me I don't recognize. At the end of the day, I'm not chasing affirmation. I'm not collecting consensus. I'm not seeking agreement. I'm seeking truth, movement, evolution. A quiet, steady unfolding toward who I'm meant to be, not who I've been shaped to perform as. That's the work. No timeline, no trophies, no need to make it pretty. Just presence. And if that confuses some people, so be it. I'm not here to be digested. I'm here to be real. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the More's October Rants. Signing out. Have a good one, guys.